Big television game for the Barracuda. In fact, as we record this, it's a few days away, but as it comes out, it'll be tonight. Barracuda taking on the Silver Knights.
Yes.
Yeah, on NBC Sports California. They're a 30-point team.
Yep.
The Barracuda are having a pretty good season so far. What's the high-level preview of this tilt?
Well, it's a Henderson team that's playing their best hockey of the year, but what makes it fun is the rivalry really at the NHL level, right? The deep rivalry between the Sharks and the Golden Knights, and it spills over to the American Hockey League. And, since the Silver Knights joined the division, they were one of the best teams. They've fallen on some harder times as they've tried to fill in their prospect pool, but it's always fun when you see the colors. It seems like the rivalry is rich, just like the NHL. So it should be fun. For the Barracuda, they're on a long homestand, 7-game homestand. It's the point of the year where you're halfway through the season. You've got to stack points if you want to continue to climb in the division. So it's a valuable opportunity to try to take advantage of a team below you in the standings.
And you get to work with Drew Remenda later on tonight. So that's always good.
Yes, he's the best. He's the absolute best. He's done a ton of games for me this year. He'll do actually all 3 of our television broadcasts this year, amongst others, but I just try to soak in the knowledge whenever I work with him.
All right, so for those who are paying a little bit of attention to the CUDA, but not full attention, if you're going to watch the game tonight, from your perspective, who are some of the guys to keep an eye on?
Well, there's a long list, right? You can look prospects. You can look kind of middle tier guys who have been here for a couple of years. I think of Daniil Gushchin, maybe a Thomas Bordeleau, a Tristan Robbins, or you can even go veteran. Andrew Poturalski leads the AHL in scoring.
Yep.
He'll represent the Barracuda at the All-Star Classic in Coachella Valley. It'll actually be a homecoming for him because he spent the last 2 years with the Firebirds. He has been outstanding. Other veteran guys, too, who have been big pieces of this team. Jimmy Schultz, who's the captain this year, played with Potsy the last 2 years in Coachella Valley. He's outstanding, just the way he defends, the way that he kind of carries the play. So there are tons of different guys to watch. If you're looking more prospect heavy, you can look at guys like Bstead, who's in his first season in North America. He's a little banged up, so we'll see if he plays. But Luca Cagnoni has been dynamic. Predominantly on the power plays where he's put up a lot of points, but his skating ability, his hockey smarts have been really fun to watch. And Colin Graff is now back with the team. So it's a long list of guys to watch, but there's a blend, right, of the prospects, of that middle ground, and some of these veterans who have been just huge pieces to the success of this team this year.
Just looking at the division standings right now, I think Calgary's ahead of everybody else by a handful of points. But after that, so many teams in the mix, like right in the hunt of a playoff spot. How do you see this final stretch of this season going for the Barracuda, and what do the playoffs look like in terms of trying to make that push?
Well, they're in a great spot, but the thing about the Pacific Division, because you play everybody so much, you can really kind of cannibalize each other. So if you go on
ground quickly,
you can make ground, or you can fall out quickly.
Okay,
so they're in a good, comfortable spot.
Right.
I mean, I think there's no major concern that they wouldn't make the postseason this year because there's so many teams kind of clustered, but 7 of the 10 make it. So the design by the AHL a couple years ago when they expanded the playoffs was to get as many teams in there with making it still competitive to get in and making it important in the regular season. But they wanted more teams because playoff hockey is so valuable for development. So the Barracuda are in a good spot, but obviously just turning the corner on the halfway point of the year, they've got to continue to trend in the right direction. And if they play the way they've played when they've been at their best, they're going to be one of the hardest teams to beat. They've had moments where they've kind of, taken steps back at moments of the season. They're still very good and competitive. So they've got to continue to trend in the right direction, and they'll be fine to make the postseason. Hopefully a long run is in their future.
Selfishly, I would like to see the Barracuda stack the deck a little bit with their players. And I mean like bubble players that have been up and back, and we'll talk about some of them with the Sharks this year, or even bringing some players to the team that are currently in other teams right now. I would love to see this team, this franchise, have an extended playoff run. I think he could do so much for not just only the players, but also the franchise itself.
Yeah, the Barracuda were an annual playoff team for the first, I think, 5 years they made the postseason, but they've fallen on some harder times. Now, people think when the NHL franchise is struggling, well, the AHL franchise has to be good because that's where all the young prospects are. It doesn't work like that. When you rebuild, you've got to completely retool, and it takes 2 or 3 years to get prospects into the mix, develop them, and get them ready to push for NHL opportunities. So usually, in my mind, how I've seen it is when your NHL team is struggling and you make that decision to rebuild, it takes a couple of years for the AHL team as well. So it's starting to turn. The Sharks are maybe a year or 2 away from being a competitive team. Well, the Barracuda are kind of here now. They've kind of arrived, if you will, with these prospects starting to fill in, and then veteran guys who have been a big piece as well.
When players get called up, whether it's a Colin Graff, a Mukhamadullin, obviously Askarov was here, now up with the Sharks, and who knows where his season finishes. Are they any different when they come back from the Sharks? Are they more seasoned? Are they more something? Do you notice them being any different, or are they the same player you remember from before?
It's a really good question. It is a human being business.
Right.
So sometimes guys go up in the NHL and they think, hey, I've arrived. I'm an NHL player. And then it's a shock to the system when they come back down.
Yeah.
Usually young guys, when they're on their entry-level contract, they're just excited for that opportunity, and they understand when they come back to the AHL that they're continuing to develop and that they're not a finished product.
It's not a bad thing.
It's not a bad thing at all. And I think what helps, and there's no doubt it does, is when you have a winning team like they do in the American League.
You don't
it's
mind
fun
coming
to
back
come
to
back.
this. Yeah,
it's fun to come back, and you understand it's competitive, and that there's other guys that could get called up just like yourself. So you're not the only one, the only prospect. So guys come back in a situation that you're winning, I think, with a different mindset, and they understand that if they win and they have success, they're going to rise and they're going to get a chance at the NHL.
Speaking of chances at the NHL, I'm a huge Andrew Poturalski fan. Just met him, understood like his background now, and kind of realizing a player who's won some Calder Cups, has been to a couple more, but a player who is a point per game guy through about 500 games and only has 6 NHL games under his belt. He's just never got that opportunity. I know he wants it here. I know he's got some history with Ryan Warsofsky, and I hope that chance for him too. But man, he just seems like such an important piece of this team and helping this team evolve.
Yeah, big time. So much experience. He's been to 4 Calder Cup finals. He's won 2 of them. He's led the league in scoring twice. So as you mentioned, 6 games in the NHL. People ask me all the time about him. Why isn't he getting a look?
I asked him the same thing. Respectfully,
it's hard to give a straight answer. Now, there's always guys, I think, who put up big numbers in the AHL, but maybe there's just a part of their game that doesn't translate to the NHL. Maybe it's speed. Maybe it's the role that they're thrust in. Like he's going to be a power play producer at this level. He's going to be highly offensive. When he goes to the NHL, is he going to be in a top 6 role like he is here? You know, that's the question, right? And that's usually the reasoning behind maybe a guy not getting a look. But I certainly hope he does. When you work with these guys, you're around them all the time. You realize the type of people they are, and you start rooting for them, right? Because again, it's a human being business. So I hope he gets some games, but while in the AHL, he's been fantastic. Not only productive, but what he does away from the ice, he kind of loosens up the group, is a great kind of beacon of light for these young players, and he's been all you could really ask for. And that was the vision when they brought him in. We want him to be productive. If an NHL opportunity presents itself, great, but ultimately he's here to help the young guys along and hopefully get to the NHL.
Speaking of young guys, Luca Cagnoni, fun to watch. Kind of a streaky player maybe this year in terms of point production, but as a D-man, I think there's obviously other things that are important too. What are you seeing in the, 20-year-old? He's 20 years old.
Yeah, it's incredible.
Hard to believe.
I know.
But it seems like he's having a good season.
Yeah, he's having a great season. Had a stretch of, I think, 9 games where he had no points. And that's been the only kind of blip on the radar this year, which he hasn't been highly productive in. And you look at the stats, he's one of the most productive offensive defensemen in the league. Among rookies, he's near the top in pretty much every category. Power play, he's as good as it gets, really. Again, had that kind of slow period. Aside from that, he's been outstanding. He was 19 at the start of the year, could have went back to junior. There were some question marks on whether he would or not, but he was just too good. And sometimes you force the hand of management. And
make it hard.
This is the level he needs to be at. And where he was drafted, kind of a middle round draft pick, wasn't drafted into the WHL. It's been a career for him to this point in which he's been overlooked a lot. Underrated at times. I think his size plays into that. He's not the biggest of guys, but he's a lot better than you would think defensively. The way he defends, the way he thinks, and his skating ability is what makes you believe he can play in the NHL.
You know, for so many years we've called you the voice of the Barracuda, and that's fine. I think it needs to be upgraded to now face of the Barracuda.
I appreciate that. I don't know about that. But
well, I'm gonna give you that, and I hope that it's a good face. And like I said, a very interesting couple weeks and months ahead for this team, this franchise. I hope you get to call some playoff games.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Appreciate it, Brodie.
And good luck on the broadcast tonight. And 2 more after tonight, right?
Two more after. We'll have another one the following Friday. So kind of 2 in a row, and then 1 in March. So it should be a lot of fun.
There you go. Face of the Barracuda, Nick Nollenberger.